Hi there, James Oldenburg here once again, and it's been a while since I've done a video, and I thought I'd talk today on a couple things that you can use to improvise around chord tones. So chord tones we've talked about just being basically on a 7th chord, a root, a 3, a 5, and a 7 from the major scale of that chord. So I'll get into the nitty-gritty of it after. I'll just play the example that I did in a 12-bar blues. I'm just calling this little ditty the Blue Zone, and so it's just a 12-bar blues in G, and it's using particularly just approach notes and enclosures. So yeah, I'll just play through for it a couple times here for you. Okay, so that's yeah. So that's just an improvised thing on a G blues, and it's using two devices. One is an approach note, and the other one is an enclosure. So before we talk about that, I just want to review the chord tones of any chord. So of course, in a G blues, this would be a G chord, going to a C chord, going to a D chord. And it's a 12-bar blues, so what I used for that was the G7 chord for one bar, C7 for the next bar, back to two Gs, 7s to complete the first phrase. The second phrase is 2 bars of C7 and followed by 2 bars of G7. And the last phrase, which is called the turnaround, uses the 5 chord D7, 4 chord C7, and the 1 chord G7. So, you know, in a rock setting, you would maybe use the root and the 5. That would be a G, a C, and a D. You could, of course, use G7 chord to C7 chord to D7 chord. What's common to use is just the tritone, which is just the 3 and the flat 7 of each chord. So in order to explain that fully, I'll just review the major scale. So again, when you're looking at analyzing any chord, it doesn't matter what key it's in or what key the tune's in, you take that chord at face value as it compares to the major scale. So if I look at a G7 chord, the formula for a dominant 7th chord, that's the full name for this chord, a dominant 7, is root 3, 5, and flatted 7. So not the normal 7, but the flat one. So here's my G major scale. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. That's the key signature for G major. So we're going to use the first note of that, G, the third, B, the fifth, D, and then not the normal 7, but the flat 7. You can find the flat 7 2 frets down from the root. Here's the root, G again. That would be the normal 7. This would be the flat 7. So anytime you know where the root is, there's the root G, 2 frets lower, it gives you the flat 7. So if I look at a G7 chord, if I start on the G, it would be G, root, 3, B, 5, D, and flat 7 would be a natural F, F natural. So you see the shape. Sounds like a G7 chord. If I go to C on the guitar in this position, it is exactly the same. So the root is C. Here's a C major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So notice the normal 7 is a B. What we want is a flat 7, the B flat. So I get C, E, G, B flat are the notes of that. But you'll notice that the shape is the same as it was for the G. And now for the D, because I can do that on the same string as the C, it would be the same shape. The notes for the D7 would be D, F sharp is the third, A is the fifth, and C natural is the flat 7. Normally in the key of D, that would be C sharp. Again, I take it from the major scale, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. But because we have a flat 7, that's where I get the C natural from. So there's your chord tones. Now, what you want to do is get those chord tones so that you know them in any position that you're working in. So if we're working right around this G sort of minor pentatonic scale in this area, I could say, well, I could play the G7 chord here, the G7 all in this position, the G7 arpeggio. Arpeggio is just a broken chord. Instead of playing it like a solid chord, you play it one note at a time, so it's melodic. Okay, so here's the notes. This is my G. I can play the flat 7, I can reach that, a little bit of a stretch. So that's the flat 7, the root, the 3, the 5, the flat 7. Now I can get back to the root, the 3rd, the 5, the flat 7, the root, and I could stretch for the 3 again. So there's my full arpeggio. And that sounds like G7. So those are all chord tones that belong to the chord. The C7 arpeggio would be C, E, G, B flat, C, E, G, B flat. So the same thing all the way down. B flat, I can carry on to the G. Even open E belongs to that chord. Back to the G, back to the B flat, and back to the C. So it's always good to, when you're practicing things, if you start these kinds of things, if you start on the root and extend the whole position, whatever you can reach, and then go back and go as low as you can, and then come back. So the C would be starting on C, high as I can go without moving my hand, and then I go as low as I can go when I come back to the C. So now the D7, if I do it in this position, would be D. I'm not going to just replicate that shape because I want to do it in this area. So I can get D, F sharp, A, C natural, D again, F sharp is the 3rd, A is the 5th. That's about all I can reach. Back to the F sharp, the 3rd, back to the root D, to the flat 7, C, to the 5, A, to the F sharp, which is the 3rd, back to the root. And now remember the root was 2 frets lower, so the flat 7, so there's the flat 7. And then I can hit the A, and I can hit the F sharp, back to the A, back to the flat 7, C, and end on D again. So that wrong note there. C, A, back to the D. Sounds like a D7 chord. So, in the reason I wanted to do this exercise was to say, well, first of all, you need to get comfortable with those notes so that you know where the safe spots are to land that sound like the chord. But the whole premise of an approach note is saying that, well, if I was using a G7 chord, let's say I was just playing off of this G here, G, B, D, F natural, and G, well, I can approach any one of those notes. So if I approach them all from 1 fret below, I get this. Now it's a little much, you might not use them all in a situation, but I might do something like this. approached the B from a fret below, and I played the D normally. I approached the F, which is the flat 7, from a fret below, and then I just played the root. So I get... Yeah. So those are approach notes. They can happen from below or above. So I could approach the B, the third of the G7 chord, from the C above, one fret above. Right? So I could approach the G from above. And so what it does is it just injects a little bit of tension momentarily to just spice up your line a little bit. So now I'm going to get into what I did in that blue zone, because it's riddled full of these things. So, and to start with, if I'm playing solo guitar, or even if there's a band, if there's a bass player, I might play the tritone of the chord. So I'm not going to play the root and the 5 because they don't really identify the chord that well. But the color notes that are really functional notes of this chord would be the flat 7 and the B, the third. So if I look at it from the scale, 1, 2, 3 is B, 4, 5, 6, not 7, but flat 7. I get a B and an F. Now you'll notice as B and F can kind of tumble. I can put the B on the bottom, I can put the F on the bottom, and it's exactly the same finger shape. And I can put the F on the bottom again and the B on top. Now here, because of the tuning of the second string, it's not this shape, but it's one fret higher, because that second string is of course tuned one fret lower. So here's my tritone, B and F. Now it goes back to the same other shape that we had a second ago, the F on the bottom and the B on top. So I get this. These are all the tritone for G7. The tritone is that when I play it in any one of these positions, if I play this as the G7 tritone, when I go down a fret, it generates the C7 tritone, which is kind of weird because you would think that would be G flat 7 or F sharp 7, and it is. So this tritone can be G flat 7 or it can be C7. So the reason that works is if I look at my C scale, 1, 2, 3, E is the third note of C, 4, 5, 6, flat 7 is the B flat. So there's my tritone. Now you'll notice this is the third, and this note is the flat 7. When I did the G7, they were flipped around. So this is the flat 7, and this is the 3. And that's why it works. So G, 1, 2, 3 is a B. I simply put the B up here. And the flat 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7 is there. So now I get G7 by just playing these two notes, and it does definitely define the chord. And then if I go down to C7, it's flipped around, but it sounds like C7. I don't have to play the root. It'll be in your ears for sure. And then if I go back to G7, the D7 now is on the other side of the G7. So it's super easy to play. The 1 chord, G7, 4 chord, 5 chord, 4 chord, back to 1. So the turnaround at the end goes the 5 chord, D7, 4 chord, C7, back to the 1 chord, G7. Now here, on this exercise, I decided to keep the G7 for the last 2 bars. Quite often it does go back to the 5 at the very end. So there's many different variations of a 12-bar blues, but basically it's the 1 chord for the first phrase, the first 4 bars. Here I did G, the 1 chord to the 4 chord to the 1 to the 1. So that's the first phrase. The second phrase is usually the same in a basic blues. It's 2 bars of the 4 chord, 2 bars of the 1 chord. The turnaround at the end brings us back to the beginning, and that always goes 5, 4, 1. And then it could be 5 at the end, or it could be 5, 4, 1, 1 in a more simpler form. So that's the form that I use for this exercise. And now I'll just explain the notes that I played in that first improv. So I played the G7 tritone. So that stated the chord. Then what I was trying to do was enclose. Now, we talked about approach notes. An enclosure we haven't talked about is like two approach notes. So if I'm looking at the B as my target note, I start one fret above, which is the C. I go one fret below, which is the B flat, and I land on the B. So I get this idea. So again, if I look at my notes of a G7 chord, G, B, D, F, if I enclose all those notes, which is a bit extreme, but you'll get this. Right? So you hear the last note I end on is the chord tone, the G. Last note I end on is the B. Last note I end on is the D. And you notice the shape's always the same. I'm just one fret above, one fret below, and then landing on the note. So if I just play chord tones, it'll get old really fast. Right? It sounds fine, but I'm not adding any tension into it other than what exists in the chord naturally. So if I do this, I enclosed a bunch of those notes, but it injects a little bit of spice in there. So here's what I did in this example. I played the G7 tritone, I enclosed the B, and just ended on the fifth. So everything other than these enclosures or these approach notes are going to be just chord tones. So again, G7, these are both chord tones. The tritone is both chord tones. By the way, it's called a tritone just because these notes are 3 whole tones apart. So if I look at the F, if I go one whole tone is 2 frets on the guitar. So if I go F, one whole tone to G, one whole tone to A, one whole tone to B, that's 3 whole tones. That's the note that it's going to. And they work inversely too. So if I look at that B, one whole tone higher is C sharp, one whole tone higher is D sharp, and one whole tone higher is F, which is what I played. I can play it here, that exact octave, but I played it down here. So again, we're talking about the notes F and B, which are the flat 7 and the 3 of that chord. So back to the tune. So I went chord tritone, I enclose the B, end up with the D on the top, the 5th of the chord. So that's my lick. Now you'll notice that I'm intentionally also doing these as 1-bar ideas, because then you can just plug them in wherever you want. So if I took that idea, I'm enclosing the 3rd. If I did it on a C chord, I would get this. I would enclose the 3rd of this chord. There's my tritone, or here. If I enclose the 3rd and end up with the G, the 5th on top, I get the same sounding line. So here's the G7. Here's the C7. Right? Now I could do that anywhere on the guitar, and you'll get that sort of result from that. So what I actually did in the tune, I'll go through it now, and I'll play the G7, just stating the chord on beat 1. That's a really good thing to do, get it in people's ears. Enclose the B, ending on the D. Then I went to the C7 tritone for the 2nd bar. Now I approach the C from 1 fret above. And then I just played the B flat in the G, which belonged to the C7 arpeggio. So my 2nd lick was this. Okay, so the 1st lick, enclosing the B, C7. Back to the G now for 2 bars. So I made a longer lick. I made a lick that was 2 bars long. I started the same way with the tritone. Enclose the B, chord tone D, I played the E, which is in the scale but not in the chord, to get to the G. Then I went back to the E. This is the 13th of the chord, so you could actually play a G13 chord by adding that E. That's another story. So the lick goes like this. And I just came back down. So my first line now is this. G7, C7, G7, enclosure, chord tones, and that's just an approach, B flat to B. And then I went to C7 on the next line. So this timing's a little bit different. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. That's the lick. So I went tritone. I landed on the B, which sounds pretty tense against the C7 because it has a B flat in it. And then I went back to the G, and then I played the B flat, which is actually the flat 7. So that's in the chord. So I get a weird sort of approach there to the B, which is kind of going to the G. But I land on a chord tone. And I did the same lick, but I ended on the E, which is another chord tone. So the first lick just stays on the B flat, and the second one lands on the E, which is in the chord tone. And then I just reiterated that for the G7 2 bars, that same lick, and I just kept repeating that enclosure, 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 ending on the flat 7 of G7. For the D7 chord, this is the turnaround now. So it goes 5 chord, 4 chord, 4 chord, back to the 1 chord. So I did that by just hitting chord tones. I went, the third of D7 is F sharp, to the flat 7, to the root, so there's my D7 chord. And then I did an approach from A flat to the A. Now again, that A is the same as that A. So here's my arpeggio. D, F sharp, A, C. So I did all chord tones, approach the A. Same thing on the C, exactly the same lick. I went E, which is the third of C. I went flat 7 to the root, back to approaching the 5th. So I get this, F sharp. That's a D7 chord, C7 chord, and then I just ended off with the same enclosure for the G7, back to the root, and then I played the lower tritone. This is an approach tritone. So that's the G7. Remember, it can tumble like this. So I just approached it from above. So I'll give you one more example of that. I'll play to a slower track that maybe you can play along with me on. So there you have it. So that's approach notes. Just to reiterate that, any chord tone, G, B, D, F, I can approach it from below. I can approach the B from above. I can approach the D here from below. So you can see how that just creates a little bit more line that you can use and a little bit more tension. So it'll create kind of cool lines rather than just arpeggios or just simply just playing pentatonic scales. So, and you can always interject the pentatonic scale anytime you like. So I could have done this, signaling the chord, back playing melodies. You know, so you can mix and match all these things. But today we're just talking about approach notes from 1 fret below a targeted note, which is a chord tone, which is in the blues. Most blues are going to be based on a dominant 7th chord, which is always the same formula: root 3, 5, flat 7. That's taken from each chord's major scale. So if I'm looking at a G7, I've got to think of what's the normal key signature for G major. It has an F sharp in it. When I go to the C7 chord, what's normal for C? It's just a C major scale, no sharps, no flats. So the flat 7 is a B flat. When I go to the D7, I'm thinking 2 sharps. F sharp, C sharp is the normal major scale. When I do the 7th sound, I'm going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. And there's a name for that scale. That scale in itself is called a Mixolydian scale, and that's the scale of choice over a dominant 7 chord because it fits the chord very well. So, hope you enjoy that, and I hope it helps in adding a little bit of spice into your blues. Okay, thanks for checking it out, and we'll see you again next time.